Okay, this is a video on how to remove a rear shock strut from a 2015 Renegade, which probably goes up to 2018-19. This particular model is just a two-wheel drive, so it doesn't have the rear CV axles and stuff for like the all-wheel drive would have. But since there's no other videos that I could find anyway on YouTube about how to remove this strut, I figured I'd go ahead and make one for everybody that's looking for it. Basically what I do is I remove the wheel and I remove the plastic inner wheel well, which is really simple to do. It's just some plastic plugs, or in my case somebody had put some screws in. I was able to remove that plastic inner wheel well. It saved you a ton of time just to do that, save you a ton of headaches. So basically the first thing you need to do is you need to, once you get all that wheel off and everything, is you're going to remove this cable here, which is the wheel speed sensor, and it's just like kind of shoved in this little metal bracket. I've already got most of them loosened up just for the sake of time of the video. But you just use a little pressure and gently kind of pull that away from there. You'll put that aside. And then the other one here is the electronic controls here for the brake calipers. So you'll pull that out of there and kind of get that out of the way. And then also there is the main brake line, which is right here. And that you can see was in there farther. And once it's in there, it's got this little metal spring clip that goes through a hole and clips up over that to keep that retained. So what you do is just take a pair of pliers and you pull that and it'll come off. It'll come off of there. Just put that to the side. And then you can work that out of there. So once you got all of these cables removed, you can kind of keep them out of the way. Be real careful with them because they're kind of delicate, especially wheel speed sensor. Then you'll notice you'll have these two bolts here. Okay, these are your main bolts that hold this this tower all together to your spindle. So basically, what you'll end up doing is taking an 5/8 millimeter wrench and putting it on here, and you'll put a 14 millimeter socket on the back, and you'll break that loose. And once you break those loose, you'll be able to work that nut off of here, get those nuts down to the end like this without taking them all the way out. And then you'll be able to take a hammer and just kind of tap and work those out of there. If you can't quite get into that one because you don't necessarily want to hit that plug, you can use a pry bar or something like that and kind of get it from a farther angle. And just work it out like that and tap those bits out of there. Once you work those all off, you can remove the nut off of the bolt. And they'll come off like that. Then you can use your pry bar. Try not to put too much pressure on this. Like I said, that's a real delicate, that speed sensor. And then you can tap in this direction. It'll work those out. And you can see it kind of dropped a little bit. Just fine. There's not a ton of pressure on there, so it's not like scary like some suspensions are sometimes. But you end up working those out the rest of the way. Once you get one out, the other one comes out pretty easy. Okay, the other one will pry out of there. Not the most ideal pry bar for this, but there we go. The pressure dropped a little bit. You pull both of those pins out, and then this is actually free from the stud itself. So moving on, you'll have an end link here. Okay, and like I said, I've already got that loosened up as well for the sake of time. That's the one you take the 18 millimeter wrench and put it on there, and then you'll take a Torx. Yep, it happens in videos too, if you forget. That is a T40 Torx you put on there so that ball can't spin, and then you'll just go like that until the nut works itself off. Once that comes off of there, you'll be able to remove that end link out the back, like that. You can just set that aside. Now, we're almost done actually. Then what you need to do, take an 11 millimeter socket here, and if we look up inside the wheel well here, you'll see three. You see those, Em? You see 1, 2, 3. They're 11 millimeter bolts that you're going to take out. That was the one thing I was looking for on YouTube. Is it something I can get from down here? Did I have to get from the top like we do with the fronts? Because the plastic made it really difficult to see those. And then you just spin those out. Leave one kind of in, so that way it'll carry the weight of this once you get the other ones all the way out. Lighting is a pain in here. Okay, so once we get that out of there, we can take that last one out because we'll be anticipating the weight of the strut. It's not super heavy, but it's not super light. It does have a little bit of a weight to it. So once you get that out, then you can kind of work it around and separate it down here at this knuckle. Sometimes you can get that pry bar in there, kind of separate these a little bit. It helps. Just kind of maneuver that back and forth. And then that will come right out of there. And then basically the process is just to go right in reverse. Okay, got our brand new. I went with the pre-assembled because by the time you take this apart, put a new spring on, a new shock, and this, that, and the other, you've not only wasted your time, but you've risked your life because it's pretty darn dangerous. Since they've got them already together for a reasonable price, I figure it's a whole lot cheaper than an ER visit. So we'll go ahead and just use the pre-assembled one. Basically what we're going to do is we're just going to slide these 3 holes right up where them bolts line up, and there's a pin and another pinhole there that makes sure you got this thing all lined up right. So we're going to put this up in here, kind of work it in there, put it on that pin, put it on the other thing, the other 3 holes will line up. Once you got that lined up, this is kind of the tricky part, is you got to grab a bolt, get it started, and kind of put it in with your hand. Pretty good. Once it's got the weight fairly well, you can grab the other one and start putting those in. I actually did the other side without removing the plastic wheel well, and that proved to be a giant pain in the butt, and we didn't want to do that. So we'll put these 3 bolts in here, and then we'll go ahead and torque them. I believe it's 45 foot-pounds. I always say nice and snug works just fine for me. Okay, we got those 3 tightened up. So what we're going to end up doing now is get this lined up back with our bolts. You got to kind of maneuver it a little bit, get it lined up in there, kind of lift and shift and do what you got to do. It'll go up and down fairly easy. Get your bolt ready to go. You got to make sure you use the same orientation as we did. You can't put them in the wrong direction. So you get them kind of lined up, and once it finds a spot, push it right in there just like so. Kind of wiggle it around. The other one will go right through there just like so. And then you go ahead and put your 5/8 nuts right back on there. And we'll go ahead and get those tightened up. Okay, the next thing we're going to do now that we got these 2 here tightened is we're going to put our end link back through there. So just work that back through. Put your 18mm nut back on. You start that by hand. Like I said, if you sit there and just try to ratchet it on or ratchet it off with this, it's going to end up turning that star in the center. So that's why you take that Torx and get that here so you can hold that still. So you can do it either way. You can either turn the Torx or turn the nut. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do now that we got this end link tightened up back on there nice and snug, is going to take that brake line, we're going to put that rubber donut back into the retaining bracket on here. You just got to kind of work that, don't want to pull too hard at the joints, but it will pop right in there when it's good to go. And then this little retainer clip, it's got kind of a curve and a curly cue and another little curly thing. There's a hole back here. You can see that, Em. A little hole back here. You get that hook in that hole, and then that little retainer clip will just hang there. And then you got to get it up over that to hold in. So what I did is just took a pair of needle nose pliers, just pulled it up, snapped it right along, and now that thing can't work its way out of there. So we're good there. Then the next thing we're going to do is just take this, slide that back in there, and put that donut right back where it's retained. And we're going to do the same thing with your little ABS little speed sensor there. And we're going to put that in there. So now we're all put back together, 1, 2, 3. Go back over all our nuts and bolts and just make sure they're tight and everything's torqued properly. And that was how we install the new shock and strut together. After this, I'm just going to put my plastic housing back in, mount my wheel, and I'll be all done with this installation.